CapCut PC Video Editing Tutorial 1. Getting started. How to download CapCut in PC. How to add fonts to CapCut 2. Basic editing tools. How to cut video in CapCut. How to crop video in CapCut. How to rotate video in CapCut. How to split screen on CapCut. How to reverse a video on CapCut. How to freeze frame in CapCut PC 3. Text and captions. How to add text in CapCut. How to animate on CapCut. How to do text-to-speech on CapCut. How to add captions on CapCut. How to add subtitles in CapCut. How to put text behind a person in CapCut 4. Audio editing. How to add music to CapCut. How to do text-to-speech on CapCut. Duplicate from above, but audio related to 5. Video effects and enhancements. How to add keyframes in CapCut PC. How to do camera movement in CapCut. How to zoom in. How to zoom out. How to make the camera follow you on CapCut. How to camera track on CapCut for vertical videos. How to do motion tracking on CapCut. How to do color grading. Color grade in CapCut 6. Visual effects and compositing. How to overlay in CapCut PC. How to use green screen on CapCut. How to make a watermark on CapCut 7. Blurring and masking. How to blur face in CapCut. How to blur video in CapCut. How to blur something in CapCut. How to blur background in CapCut 8. Video formatting. How to make horizontal video vertical. CapCut 9. Speed and time effects. How to do slow motion on CapCut. How to speed up a video on CapCut.